In today's video, I'll be completing 47's final mission of Season 1, Situs Inversus, without a HUD, suit only, silent assassin on master difficulty. In Hitman's 6th mission, Agent 47 finds himself in a hyper-exclusive hospital situated in the mountains of Hokkaido, Japan, prepped and ready to eliminate his two targets. The first is Eric Sodas, who suffers from the rare condition Situs Inversus, where his organs are in the wrong places, and the second is Yuki Yamazaki, a renowned lawyer that has spent a long time working for the Yakuza. The mission is simply to eliminate both targets without being spotted, and as always, the video will be broken down into two stages. The first stage is the plan. This is where I will be scoping out the different areas, gathering intel, coming up with the best course of action, and making lots and lots of mistakes. The second stage is the execution. This is where I will turn all the HUD options off and will be completing the mission based on the plan we designed in stage 1 with no cuts and no saves. If you want to skip straight to the execution stage and don't want to watch the planning stage, and skip to the time on the screen and head straight there. However, if you want to see how we designed the final run, then keep on watching. The loadout for the mission will be the same as always. The original starting location, 47 signature suit, the ICA gold baller, lockpick MK3 and 3 coins. Welcome to Supercut, the series where we take an entire let's play and condense it into one video. My name is Mr. Supercut and this is the final episode of Hitman Season 1, Situs Inversus. As you know, Run 1 is all about gathering intel, and so after rising from my bed, I had a little meander about my room, read a pamphlet, picked the lock to my bathroom cabinet, collected some rat poison and extra coins, read my own public patient journal, and then headed out into the hospital complex. I received a lovely compliment from one of the staff.
You are filling that suit out good.
Tried to get access to my neighbour's room but wasn't able to without wearing his clothes, headed up the stairs and then came across Imhotep from The Mummy. I didn't realise that Comic-Con had come to town. I listened to a long drawn out conversation between him and who I think he believed his girlfriend, but I remained unconvinced, about how he was undergoing surgery to look just like Helmut Kruger, the fashion model from the first mission in Paris. The one that 47 is the spitting image of. Imhotep, who turned out to be a man called Jason Portman, thought so too, going so far as to firstly mistake me for Kruger and then threaten to make me disappear for stealing his idea. Unfortunately for him, I don't take kindly to threats, and so I would have to deal with him later. After that awkward encounter, I found my first target, Yuki Yamazaki, who approached the head of the hospital to arrange a meeting out in the Zen garden. Instead of following either of those, I followed Portman into the restaurant area and then got denied access to a mysteriously secluded dining area by an outfitted bodyguard. No bother, as I just hopped the flimsy partition behind him, and as he was the only one who cared about me being in there and had his back turned, I could crawl around to my heart's content. There wasn't much in there other than an empty packet of cigarettes with the option to replace said packet of cigarettes with a full packet of cigarettes. I banked this intel in the old noggin, climbed back over the partition, and then headed back to my room as I knew exactly where to get some cigarettes from. Up until now, I haven't been entirely forthcoming, as I have completed this mission before, already having attained level 20, so I had entered into this series with insider knowledge. However, it had been probably over a year since I played it last, so my memory was a little bit foggy. That being said, I knew that my neighbour, some cowboy in a purple robe, had some cigarettes in his room, and because I didn't know where he was, I hopped over the balcony barrier, shimmied all the way over to his room, evaded the first guard by tossing a coin into the corner of the balcony, quickly jumped back over the barrier as the second guard was coming back out, waited for him to leave again, hopped over, distracted guard 1, picked up a cowboy bust, read the patient file for Amos Dexter, the cowboy with rotten lungs, entered the bathroom, fiddled with the toilet system, distracted the guard, knocked him out with a soda can, opened the door to the balcony, launched the bust at the other guard's head, picked up my coins and his weapon, and then noticed that Dexter was on his way back. I dropped the body, ducked behind the sofa, launched the bust and knocked him out before he spotted the guard's body sprawled across the floor. It was a good job he showed up because the cigarettes weren't actually hidden in his room, he actually kept them on his person, so had he not shown up then, I wouldn't have known what to do. The intel that came with the cigarettes indicated that the hospital had a strict no smoking policy for obvious reasons, and to have obtained cigarettes meant that he would have needed to have smuggled them in. Regardless, I picked them up, dumped his body, dropped the guard's weapon in a nearby bin, tried gaining access to Yuki's room, to which of course I was denied, and then eventually headed down to what appeared to be the only exit out of the hospital. Upon approach, I noticed that one of the bodyguards on the decking was an enforcer with the little white dot above his head, which would make escaping this nightmare somewhat difficult. However, I would cross that bridge when I came to it. I was more interested in the conversation they were having. They were discussing how Yuki was currently having massive nicotine cravings and would essentially kill for a cigarette. I then saved the game and walked outside just to see what the enforcer would say to me after he'd spotted me.
Hey, who are you?
I then shot them dead and hit restart. It may seem strange here that I restarted from the beginning for run 2 as opposed to where I just saved the game in run 1, but in reality there were 5 whole real life days between these 2 runs, so I needed to refresh my memory. I headed straight for Dexter's room and took out the 2 guards and then basically just lie in wait for hours and hours until Dexter finally showed up carrying the elusive contraband. After picking up the packet, I headed back into my room, picked up the rat poison and coins from the bathroom cabinet, tried to see how I could gain access to Yuki's room to plant the cigarettes she so desperately craved. However, as per run 1, I couldn't get access. I followed her into the Zen garden where she had a little rendezvous with the head of the hospital atop a red bridge where the two discussed how important it was that the operation of my second target, Eric Soda's, went well. I had a quick look around the Zen garden and found lots of doors I couldn't access, and I was beginning to feel a bit like a rat in a cage. I headed to the highest point I could reach in the garden, picked up a hammer and then headed back into the hospital and followed the head doctor into the restaurant. He had a conversation with one of the patients about an unfortunate accident that had recently taken place where another patient had been fed a poisonous piece of sushi and died. After that I followed the doctor around again and eventually we ended up back at the Red Bridge where another conversation took place. The doctor's path was now laid out and marked, but it wasn't useful or helpful to me. I followed him around again and eventually wandered off into the hot springs area where dozens of rich, sick people were soaking in the fresh mountain water. After aimlessly wandering around for a bit and then realizing I couldn't really go anywhere due to the highly restricted access of the doors, I eventually made my way all the way back to the cornered off restaurant area and replaced the empty packet of cigarettes with the full packet of cigarettes that I'd picked up from Poindexter. After a while, Yuki showed up, made a quick phone call, and instead of waiting for her to spot the cigarettes, I saved the game and then tried to drop a light fixture onto her head. This did work in the sense that it killed the target, but it also didn't work in the sense that it caused a right fuss, so I quickly hit reload. In run 3 I wanted to see if I could take Yuki out from within the enclosed space, but it was way too confined for me to move about without being noticed. After hopping the partitions and narrowly escaping detection, Yuki picked up the cigarettes and then headed out to find a secluded spot to fry her lungs in private. Her and her 2 bodyguards headed up to the top of the Zen garden where I found the hammer, which first of all was in plain sight of everybody in the hospital, and second of all was right next to an exploding barrel. It's like she's never played a video game before. I knew that the barrel wouldn't explode by itself and that I'd either have to puncture a hole in its side with a screwdriver or shoot it with my gold baller. I didn't fancy the GB option and didn't have a screwdriver to hand, so opted for the cleaner approach of hopping the barrier and decking her with a hammer. After silently taking her out, I snapped her neck and fled the area. I hung around and waited to see just how long it took the bodyguards to notice that the person they were supposed to be bodyguarding had literally just ceased to be alive. Over a minute. It took them over a minute to realise that the most important person that they had been assigned that day, probably that year, had just died about 2 feet away from them. Because of how appalled I was at their terrible bodyguarding, I shot them both dead and hit reload. In run 4, I quickly headed back up to that area because whilst waiting for them to notice their dead assignment, I had spotted a balcony that I could climb. I hung over the edge, slid down the pipe, and finally found an entrance into the parts of the hospital that were off limits to the riffraff. I skulked around the area, found an individual in a highly compromised situation, took complete advantage of him, and whilst making my way through, got spotted by a camera. Fortunately, there was a door right next to me, so I headed through and found myself just beneath the restaurant. I headed back toward the pipe, climbed down, and then found 2 maintenance guys currently taking a break, or slacking off, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and playing Dancing Stage Euromix for the PlayStation 1, which is the one that I had when I was but a boy. I lured them into the room next door using my coins, knocked them out, and hid their bodies. I began my hunt for a screwdriver and thought that near the 2 maintenance men would be a good place to start, but unfortunately I didn't find one in the hallways and was eventually spotted in the confined walkway and escorted out. I headed back to the garden, slid down the pipe for a 3rd time, took out the 2 nearby guards, checked my surroundings, dumped their bodies in a nearby locker, and then headed toward the area beneath the helipad. I opened the door and found a guard sleeping on the job, so for his gross misconduct I launched a hammer at his head. I dumped him in the nearby locker, but apparently another guard had heard some commotion and had come to investigate. Without thinking, I grabbed him from behind the doorway, choked him out, and dumped him too. I then spotted some pills on the nearby table, so decided to poison them for the sake of it, and as I did so, the helicopter pilot also decided to join the party. Whilst hiding in the doorway, Diana, for the 2nd time, decided to whisper in my ear that she had some intel, and then proceeded to not tell me what that intel was. This distracted me, and so I was a little delayed in taking out the pilot, and he noticed me hugging the wall. I knocked him out anyway and then stole his outfit, headed back the way I'd come, and then entered the room I'd climbed through twice already, where I assumed the hospital staff slept, and found a clicker, also known as the neurochip remote control, lying on the bed. The intel stated that this was used to control the chemical dosage released from the chip residing in the curator's brain, but without any further context I had absolutely no idea what it was talking about. I continued on my quest to find a screwdriver and blitzed through hallways, washrooms and even a mechanic station, all of which contained 0 screwdrivers. However, I wasn't about to give up hope, because if I'd learned anything from any of the past 6 missions, it was that the item I was looking for would always turn up eventually. After a while I found myself heading up a staircase that led into the morgue, and whilst I wasn't trespassing, the surgeons were both labelled as enforcers, so they obviously knew the pilot very well. No matter, because I followed one of the henchmen through a set of double doors, got spotted by a camera, headed through another door, and like I said, what I'm looking for always turned up eventually. I picked up the screwdriver and then restarted the mission. In run 5, I now had to try and figure out the best and quickest way to obtain the cigarettes, plant the cigarettes, and then pick up the screwdriver and puncture a hole in the oil tank before Yuki headed to the top. With that in mind, obviously it was more important to pick up the screwdriver and puncture a hole before planting the cigarettes, because as soon as she spotted the cigarettes, she would then go and smoke them all. I climbed down the pipe and headed over toward the room beneath the helipad, launched a hammer at a guard's head and then got spotted by another guard, so hit restart. In run 6 I headed back and this time just let sleeping dogs lie, poisoned the pills that I'd seen before with the rat poison taken from my bathroom cabinet, and hid in the locker as the helicopter pilot approached. I watched him unknowingly pick up the poisoned pills and then carry them back up the stairs. I tried following, but there was absolutely no way past the guards, so I saved the game here just in case I was spotted, and as I headed back down the stairs I got spotted by a gardener, so knocked him out and hit reload. In run 7 I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, so I launched the hammer from where I was at the top of the stairs, and before I began dragging the gardener back up the stairs I picked up a packet of cigarettes that he had dropped, and I got spotted by the guard who'd come to investigate, so I hit reload. In run 8 I did exactly the same, except this time I dragged the corpse down the stairs. I hid behind the wall hoping the guard didn't descend the entire staircase, but as he showed no signs of stopping, I launched the camera from behind the wall and got spotted doing so, so hit restart. In run 9 I executed the exact same plan as last time, but this time made sure to leave the room before I could get trapped. I hid behind the wall and lay in wait of the gardener, grabbed him from behind the wall to choke him out, but unfortunately got spotted by one of the guards and then killed, so hit restart. In run 10, I decided to investigate the strange cowboy character, Amos Dexter. I snuck into his room as he left, and then when I didn't find anything of interest, I followed him to the restaurant where he had his first outburst of the day. He tried accessing the area behind the bar, but the bartender blocked his path, to which he became infuriated. Eventually, he staggered off, acting very suspiciously, then tried to access the area behind the sushi restaurant, to which he was denied entry again, then entered into a racist tirade.
If it wasn't for us Americans over here, you'd all be speaking, German, ach ja, and Japanese konnichiwa sushi, or how'd you like that, huh?
I do speak Japanese, and I am Japanese.
And complained about the restrictions being imposed on him.
What I need is some damn freedom.
After moving outside, he began berating the guard restricting access to the helipad, demanding to know why he himself wasn't flown in on a helicopter. After this, he moved along to 2 more guards, and I was this close to just smacking him in the back of the head. The guards, however, weren't taking any of his nonsense and dismissed him immediately. He then tried gaining access to the security room, which of course was off limits. Eventually, he made a phone call to his wife, who was clearly worried about his health, and he continued to lie to her about the fact he wasn't smoking anymore, whilst walking around in his big boy cowboy hat carrying a packet of cigarettes in his pocket. Eventually, after 10 minutes of tyrannical escapades, Dexter made his way back to his room, and I was ready to take him out. I accidentally tossed the cowboy bus next to the guard instead of at his head, and so had to shoot him instead. Then I launched the bus at the guard on the balcony, to which Dexter became alerted, but that was fine because he was next. I tried getting close enough to toss him over the railing, but it wouldn't let me, so I pointed the gold baller at his head and he began to beg for his life. Now, normally I am a man of mercy, but 47 woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, so shot him dead. I then hit restart. The point of run 10 was to find out how long it took Dexter to leave his room and then return to his room, and it was roughly 9 to 10 minutes. So in run 11, I needed to try and figure out the best course of action. I climbed over to his room, knocked out the 2 guards and dumped their bodies, and then using my instinct, I could see the very distinct cowboy hat on the upper floor. This indicated that he was currently on the phone to his wife and was ready to head down to his room next. With that, I hid in the bathroom and then crept up behind him and knocked him out. I then picked up the packet of cigarettes, headed toward the top of the Zen garden, slid down the pole, picked up the neurochip remote control, climbed the stairs to the morgue, got spotted by basically everybody, unloaded my weapon into the creepy doctors, and then hit restart. In run 12, I headed straight for the morgue and figured I needed to take out the doctors in the main area before I could pick up the screwdriver. I headed through a nearby door and up the stairs and annoyingly got spotted by a camera. The top of the staircase led me directly to the location of Eric's sodas, where after knocking out the nurse, I was given an opportunity to drain the stem cell tanks that were currently pumping into his body. After draining them, I was then given an opportunity to refill them, but I didn't have anything to refill them with. After this, a guard had come to investigate, and so I shot him dead. Upon leaving and heading back down the stairs, the nurse's body, cooling in a pool of blood, was spotted by another nurse. I headed back down the stairs, tried shooting the spotlight above the 2 doctors, but nothing happened other than the fact that they saw me do it. With that, I hit restart. In run 13, I picked up the poison, picked up a hammer, slid down the pole, headed to the morgue, and then saved the game because I knew that trying to pick up this screwdriver was going to be my biggest challenge yet. I headed into the nearby room, shot the camera from the last run, and then went and flicked the nearby switch to which one of the doctors came to investigate. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, so I clambered up the stairs, and then once he'd entered, I knocked him out. I then turned it back on, ensuring that the second doctor didn't come to investigate as well. I headed back into the main area of the morgue and crouched down beside a rotting corpse and worked out the walk patterns for the 2 guards that entered at different times and the remaining doctor. I tried to knock out the doctor when I thought the coast was clear, but unfortunately I caught the attention of one of the guards who came to wake the doctor back up. I shot the guard just as the doctor was coming to, and so unfortunately for him I had to put him back to sleep. At that moment, the other guard opened the doors and spotted the dead guard on the floor and the doctor getting shot, and so immediately drew his weapon to take me out. After a few misfires, I shot him dead and then hit reload. In run 14, I shot the camera, flicked the switch, then hopped onto the nearby operating table. The doctor walked past, I knocked him out and then headed into the main area. This time I knocked out the doctor in good time, hid the body and managed to duck behind the rotting corpse again just before the 2 guards came patrolling. I then launched my hammer at one of them, dumped his body in the same locker as the doctor, and then headed back out to grab the other doctor to hide his body as well. Once the coast was clear, I dumped the body, shot the camera to the next area and then moved on through. I'd finally gained access to the screwdriver and it only took roughly 5 minutes to do the entire process. I decided that whilst I was here I'd try and see if I could take out sodas, but was unable to get access to any of the rooms. I shot the camera in the adjoining room, which the 2 remaining doctors noticed and ran away from. What was interesting about this was that several guards that were guarding the cameras also left the area to escort the doctors to safety, so I was able to sneak in and shut off all the cameras in the complex. After a while I gave up on trying to gain access to these 2 locked doors by myself and decided to try and use a knocked out guard to open the door, but he also didn't have access, so I still couldn't get in. With all guards taken care of, I tried to use the neurochip on the doctor's brain but realised I hadn't picked it up. I backtracked, picked up the neurochip remote control, headed back and then pressed the button. Upon release of the medicine, the doctor became elated and decided he needed to spend time with his precious organs, so headed into the organ room and dismissed the guards. I then snuck in behind, knocked him out and dumped his body. Right there, in all of its glory, was Soda's inverted heart ready to be transplanted. So I picked it up and tossed it in the bin. I exited the area, climbed up the pole, punctured the oil tank with the screwdriver, and then realised I hadn't yet picked up any cigarettes, so had to wait for Dexter to head back to his room. Rather than just being patient and waiting for him to return, I headed to my room, clambered across, and then got spotted by the guard as my bald head loomed over the side of the railing. I knocked him out and launched his body off the balcony, and then knocked out and dumped the other guard in the nearby locker, and then after some more waiting, Dexter finally showed up. I hid behind the sofa, missed tossing the bust at his head, and just tossed it behind him instead, so I had to resort to my trusty hammer. I then launched Dexter off the balcony as well. Finally, with the cigarettes in hand, I headed to the restaurant, planted the packet, and then headed to the garden to wait for Yuki to show up. But she was miles away, so I had to do some more waiting and followed her around for a bit out of pure boredom. At long last, she had picked up the cigarettes and headed to the top of the garden for a secret smoke, and I sat in disbelief over the fact that she hadn't yet combusted. However, just as I was beginning to wonder what on earth I was supposed to do, she flicked the finished cigarette to the floor and immediately became a raging inferno. With that, I ran toward the exit exit, got spotted by the guards, and then ski lifted into the sunset. I'd solidified my ideal route in only 14 runs, and now I just needed to figure out exactly how to perfect it. In run 15, I headed to the guard and picked up the hammer, slid down the pole, through the window, grabbed the neurochip remote control, up the stairs to the morgue, waited for a bit, headed toward the door to the right, flicked the switch to distract the doctor, knocked him out, and then saved the game. I knocked out and dumped the other doctor, knocked out and dumped the first guard, shot the camera, picked up the screwdriver, distracted the second guard with a coin, knocked him out and dumped his body, then grabbed the body of the last doctor to see if his uniform would be enough to gain entry into the stem cell supply. Unfortunately, it wasn't, so I dumped him in a nearby furnace and then headed through to the mortuary cooler's room. Whilst heading in to use the neurochip remote on the doctor, I alerted one of the guards to my presence and had to carefully maneuver around a dead motorcyclist to not get spotted. After punching the button, I tried exiting the way I'd entered, but annoyingly got spotted whilst doing so. With everybody losing their heads, I hit reload. In run 16, I tried hiding on one of the slabs in the main area, but got spotted arising from the dead by one of the guards. I knocked him out and dumped his body along with the other patrolling guard, and then tried to figure out how I could get close enough to the neurochip doctor without alerting anybody to my presence. I ran a tap to which the other doctor came to investigate and clean up, then picked up the screwdriver and then shot the camera above the entrance to Soda's heart, but this time got spotted doing so by said camera, so hit reload. In run 17, I got spotted acting foolishly by the guards, so hit reload again. In run 18, I got spotted dumping one of the guards in the locker, so hit reload. In run 19, I got spotted again but was able to take the second guard out. I then shot the first camera and then the second camera, to which the doctor alerted the nearby guards. One of them entered exactly where I was crouching, so I hit reload. And then in run 20, I hid on the table again and got spotted again when rising from the dead, so hit reload. In run 21, I knocked everyone out in a sensible fashion and then headed past the sink and through a door and got immediately spotted by a camera. A guard came to escort me out, to which I politely declined. I took out the second guard, dumped both bodies, destroyed the cameras, hit the neurochip remote, and then waited for the guards to leave the organ room so I could take out the doctor and heart in peace. But once the doctor was in there was no way for me to open the door from the outside, so I couldn't follow him in at all. There was a point where he got close to me, which was close enough for me to decrease the medicine in the neurochip, to which he decided to leave the organ room. As he got close to the door, I hit the button again, made him all happy, to which he legged it back to his precious organs and closed the door behind him. Unfortunately for him, I had to decrease the medicine again because I certainly needed access to this organ room, and then he exited and waltzed right past me without so much as a second glance. I then knocked him out and tried to get access to the stem cell supply room using his body, but alas, he also didn't have access to this facility. I dumped his body, tossed the heart, and then hit reload because it had been a very messy run indeed. In run 22, I knocked out the doctor and tossed a coin to distract the guard, but then decided to just restart from the beginning because I believed I could make a more useful save point. In run 23, I followed the usual route and managed to knock out the two doctors, and then when attempting to dump the body of the second guard, instead of going to the locker, I went through the nearby door, got spotted by a camera, so hit restart. In run 24, exactly the same as last time, minus the idiotic mistake, and then managed to take out the final guard and then dumped all the bodies in the lockers. I also managed to pick up the yellow camera icon whilst lying down on the metal slab, but that's by the by. I then saved the game before heading into the mortuary cooling room. I managed to make it to the neuro doctor without being spotted by anyone, released the medicine, and then when exiting got spotted by one of the guards. In run 25, I headed toward the stem cell room but got spotted by a camera. In run 26, I used my map to try and figure out how I could get to the door that led into the camera room but couldn't figure it out. I shot the camera above the stem cells, picked up the screwdriver, and then got recorded by the camera above the organ room. I then found out that you can launch a screwdriver at a camera, so I did that and hit reload. In run 27, I launched the screwdriver at the camera, and this time instead of the two doctors running around like maniacs, one of them just went upstairs to investigate, which is hilarious because it didn't happen upstairs. I then picked up the screwdriver from the ground as I wasn't sure what to do next, and then hit reload. In run 28, I flooded the sink and then threw the screwdriver at the camera to see if the second doctor would go and investigate, and he did. Then I hit reload. In run 29, I snuck into the cooler room, used the neurochip remote control, then snuck back around, and as the doctor entered into the organ room, I threw the screwdriver at the camera, and the doctor and two guards became suspicious, but only one of them went to investigate. I managed to sneak into the organ room, knock out the doctor, kill the heart, then headed out the way I'd come, pushed a guard over the balcony for good measure, punctured the oil tank, then realised I hadn't yet picked up any cigarettes, and decided that based on Dexter's current location, I was better off attempting to retrieve them from the gardener below the helipad. After waiting for a very long time, I tried taking the gardener out, but it definitely didn't look or feel good, but that didn't matter as I now had a packet of cigarettes. With that, I hurried back to the restaurant, placed the cigarettes, then headed toward the exit location to see about taking out those two guards whilst Yuki plotted her own demise. I tossed a coin, knocked one out, then the other, and then realised that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. Using my instinct, I followed Yuki around the hospital, and eventually, after an eon, she finally went up in flames, and I was free to exit the mountain once again. I had completed the run twice now, and I was convinced that this was the best course of action. However, I still wasn't pleased with how it was looking, and there was a lot of waiting around. So in run 30, I started again. Whilst watching the introduction to the mission, I noticed that the nurses dressed in blue had a familiar looking logo on the back of their uniform, and this sparked a renewed sense of hope in me. I began by picking up the rat poison and then headed to the two guards posted outside of the exit to the hospital, and as I tossed a coin, I realised I didn't have a melee weapon to knock either of them out with, so decided I'd deal with them last. I headed the usual route and found myself in the morgue just as all the different parties turned their backs. I shot the camera, flicked the switch, knocked out the first doctor, knocked out the second doctor and dumped his body, then knocked out the first guard and dumped his body, then knocked out the second guard and dumped his body, then went back for the first doctor and dumped his body, then headed up the stairs and saved the game. I choked out the nurse and dragged her all the way down the stairs and through the surgery, took out the camera above the stem cell supply room, had the nurse glitch the flip out on me, probably because she knew my plan was foolproof, and dragged her toward the supply room door, which opened once the nurse had gotten close enough. I opened up the stem cell drawer, poisoned it with the rat poison, dumped the nurse's body in the nearby locker, headed back up the stairs toward the stem cell control unit, drained the supply, refilled the supply, and lo and behold, Sodas died. With that, I headed back the way I'd entered, knocked out the guard and dumped his body in the nearby locker, forgot the screwdriver, so headed back, and then decided to head up the nearby staircase to see what I could see. I got spotted by 50 cameras and then escorted off the premises. Punctured the oil tank, tossed a hammer at the gardener, which was heard by the nearby guard, who then woke up the gardener, but not before I'd picked up his packet of cigarettes. I headed to the restaurant, placed the cigarettes, headed to the exit, knocked out the two guards, and then restarted the mission because it had obviously gotten very messy. In run 31, I wanted to see if it would be quicker to pick up the cigarettes from Amos Dexter by waiting for him in his room, so picked up the poison and then shoveled along the outside of our adjoining balconies. However, I accidentally got spotted by a guard, so hit restart. In run 32, I managed to knock them both out successfully, and then realised that as I had to wait for Dexter to return to his room, I might as well take care of the two guards near the exit, so carried the heavy cowboy bust all the way over, knocked them both out, then returned in time to see Dexter returning to his room. I followed him in, knocked him out, picked up the cigarettes, headed to the morgue, knocked out the first doctor, saved the game, knocked out the second one, knocked out the first guard, shot the camera, knocked out the second guard, but then when attempting to knock out the nurse, she saw me coming. That didn't stop me from giving her a mild concussion though, and then I dragged her floppy body to the stem cell supply room, dumped her body, contaminated the stem cells, killed Sodas, finally went to puncture the oil tank, and then realised I hadn't picked up the screwdriver, so hit restart. In run 33, I tried all of that again, but when taking out the two guards near the exit, I got spotted, so quit the game. In run 34, I decided to forget Dexter and focused my efforts on the gardener's cigarettes instead. I realised that very near the beginning of the mission, the gardener was already approaching the underpass, so if I could get there quick enough, I could pick up the cigarettes very early on. I saved the game, and as I went to choke him out, I got spotted, so hit reload. In run 35, I hid behind a wall further away, but the gardener walked a bit too far away from me, so I couldn't reach him, so again hit reload. In run 36, I managed to choke him out with no issues, picked up the cigarettes, and then attempted to drag his body up the stairs and into the room below the helipad. After that, I headed to the morgue, carried out business as usual, but got spotted by a surgeon whilst attempting to bludgeon him, so hit restart. In run 37, I knocked out the guard before heading toward the gardener and dumped his body in a nearby locker, then knocked out the gardener with no issues and dumped his body in the same place, but then when taking out the second surgeon with the hammer, I got spotted by the nearby guard, so shot him dead, then got spotted by the other guard, so shot him dead as well. I headed up the stairs, knocked out the nurse, dragged her toward the stem cells, opened the door, dumped her body, then exited the room to pick up the screwdriver to see if I could take out Yuki any quicker than I had been. By puncturing the oil tank and placing these cigarettes, I was hoping I'd speed up the overall process. Even though I now had to backtrack toward the stem cell supply, I was hoping that overall this would be quicker, but only time would tell. I made it back to the morgue and had a horrible thought that with the nurse being inside the stem cell supply room, I now no longer had access, but fortunately her body was close enough to the door hidden in the locker that I could still gain access. I poisoned the supply, killed Sodas, headed to the exit, and then found that Yuki was absolutely miles away, so the process wasn't sped up at all, so hit restart. In run 38, I took out the guard guard and gardener, picked up the cigarettes, knocked out all the relevant parties, picked up the screwdriver, went to place the cigarettes as quickly as possible, and then found that Yuki was already there, so I hit restart. In run 39, I knocked out the guard and gardener, left their bodies to freeze in the cold mountain air, headed to the morgue and saved the game. I tried knocking out the first guard head on, but he saw me, so hit reload. In run 40, I caused the guard to come investigate, then knocked him out from behind the wall and then hit reload, and I have no idea why. In run 41, instead of taking out the guard, I let him leave and then whizzed past the squad, knocked out Doctor 1, then Doctor 2, and tried to take out guard 1 straight away, but he spotted Doctor 2 lying on the floor, so hit reload. In run 42, I got spotted by the camera whilst lying on the metal slab, knocked out Doctor 1, forgot to turn back on the lights for Doctor 2, who then went to investigate and found Doctor 1 conked out on the floor. I sent a homing hammer to the back of his head, knocked out guard 1, but as guard 2 entered, he saw Doctor 2 lying in the doorway. In run 43, I went to knock out the guard straight away, but caused one of the doctors to come investigate, and whilst dodging him, I got spotted by the other. In run 44, I tried to knock out guard 2 by first using a distraction, but then both guards spotted me, so with that I hit restart. In run 45, I knocked out guard and gardener, headed to the morgue, and then tossed a coin in the doorway, knocked out the approaching guard, shot the camera above the stem cell room to go get the screwdriver, but as I entered through the doorway, I got spotted by a doctor. In run 46, I crouched behind the small cabinet and saved the game. As the guard approached, I pulled him over and knocked him out, and to my surprise, nobody else was alerted. I dragged him away, and then when running through the surgery, I got spotted. In run 47, same thing, but this time when lying down on the metal slab, I got spotted by the camera, so hit reload. In run 48, I caused one of the doctors to come investigate, so hit reload. In run 49, whilst knocking out the second doctor, the 2 other doctors became alerted and came to investigate, so I hit reload. In run 50, I finally took care of everyone appropriately, picked up the screwdriver, punctured the drum, placed the cigarettes, headed back through the morgue, dragged the nurse all the way to the stem cell supply room, poisoned the supply, and then the game crashed. Clearly, I was on to a winner here, and the game was not happy. In run 51, I did everything exactly the same as last time, and this time was able to successfully poison the stem cells and take out sodas, and was then alerted that Yuki had been taken out at exactly the same time, which was rather satisfying. I then moved the gardener's body toward the locker, climbed up the pipe, and by this point the guard had already started dragging Yuki's body away in a body bag. I headed toward the exit, knocked out the 2 guards, and finished the run with a time of 12 minutes and 7 seconds. And with that, it was time to turn off all of the HUD options and attempt the perfect run. So, without further ado, I present to you my no HUD, suit only, silent assassin, master difficulty run of Situs Inversus.
As part of the service here at Gamma, your personal room has been outfitted with a radio frequency identification chip. The device will unlock and allow access to your personal suite. No key.
Shit!
Hey, so you're the curator's research aide, right?
Let me guess. You want to know about the medical trial?
Oh, so it is true. The guy's had a mood-altering neurochip implanted in his brain. So how does it work? Does it work?
Sorry, you're just gonna have to wait for my research paper. I'm following the trial closely, and with a little luck, it'll be the basis for my doctorate. All I can say is that I've got a very interesting bit of insight into his mental state.
Fine. I'll just have to ask you again when we're drunk.
Okay. No, this seems pretty easy. If this goes to this, that goes to that. There.
Activated.
Looking like a pro, sir.
I'm sure you have your ways. Ways I do not know. If you don't mind me
Mr. Jason Portman, please come to the hospital entrance. A doctor will escort you to your checkup. That was for Mr. Jason. Warning. Stem cells.
soda's down. To be honest, I'm not sure what to feel about this one. Well, that's for another time. Yamazaki awaits.
Paging. Hospital Director Nakamura. Nakamura-san, please come to the operating theater. Stop.
That's both targets down. Time to find an exit. We're done here.
You said?
Yeah, get rid of that thing. Good job.
Cock.
Oh, this is not good, my friend. Not good.
Hey, you are a sharp-dressed dude.
Flying on. Couple of months. Yeah, it's a good situation. This Yamazaki. Damn. You heard it. Investigate report, brother.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on future videos. I'm sure you all know by now how subscribing to a channel works. As mentioned at the end of my last video, that's it for Hitman for now. I've enjoyed making the series and I'm excited to begin work on season 2, and there's a lot of ideas I have for it which I know you guys will love, but it's going to take a lot of time for me to plan and create. So with that, we say farewell to Agent 47 and Diana for now, and we will see them again very soon. That being said, also mentioned in my last video, I have a lot of other games that I've recorded and worked on, and I'm excited to share these with you. So thank you for watching. Thank you for the support on the series so far. You guys have absolutely been amazing. Take care and God bless.